3, 4.
Hi everyone, this is Jewish Talk coming to you from Nassau Community College on 90.3 WHPC, also streaming on nccradio.org. This program is later archived on Spreaker.com. This program is repeated Sundays at 11 p.m. So hi there, my name is Rabbi Perl. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This all depends on when you are listening or watching. Oi, gewalt. I nearly forgot to say, you can see us right now on Facebook Live at WHPC or my own page at Anshul Pearl. So hello on the radio, hello online, and hello to the world. You know, before we get into it today, I was wondering if, this coming Wednesday evening and Thursday evening, we're going to be celebrating the holiday of Passover with the Seder. And I was wondering, what would be the sign that you happen to be at a Republican Seder? Well, I would say they refuse to answer the 4 questions without a subpoena. Another indication would be that they demand a recount on the 10 plagues. Okay, everybody, take it easy now. Take it easy. I mean, Kim is jumping all over the place over here. But anyway, welcome to the Seder. I want you to sit back now and imagine it's now Wednesday night or Thursday night and you're celebrating the Seder. And I want to share with you some ideas that you could actually share with your own family and friends at the Seder. In fact, yesterday, as we all sat down at the Farbrengen in our synagogue in Mineola, I shared with everybody, how can we get into the mood, into the Jewish mood of our Seder that will be inclusive, get everybody into a really deeper discussion and an appreciation of what the evening is all about. And I make the following suggestion. The whole Passover evening, historically, at the beginning, there had to be a sacrifice called the Paschal Lamb, the Korban Pesach, and everybody had to be home, and that's where the basis of the coming together, the family and friends, is all based on the very beginning. And I was thought, just as then people had to go through a whole process, and there was a sacrifice, they had to take a lamb, and this was really the deity of the Egyptians, and all that self-sacrifice. Why don't we ask our friends at the Seder, our family, how far, what are you willing to sacrifice for the sake of Jewish life? For example, you're traveling and it's Passover, for example. Will you be willing to give up 2 or 3 days of your vacation to find a local synagogue or Chabad house where you could have a Seder? Are you willing to change your plans so to be able to hear the Megillah on Purim? So the idea is to think about this and be willing to share. And perhaps I'm challenging everybody listening this morning, bring this up at the Seder. Ask everybody there, what each of us go around the table, what have you in the last year perhaps done that you would consider sacrificing on behalf of Jewish life? So let's imagine I'm sitting with you, you're sitting with me, and we're sitting at the Seder. And therefore, I want to welcome each and every one of you and wish you a happy Passover, a Chag Kosher V'Sameach. And with that welcome, I want to say welcome to those who are listening, of course, on the radio, and those who are posting their comments and best wishes on our Facebook page. So welcome to Eitan Kilshevsky, Richard Rottenberg, Jean Brandonston, and Jonathan Wolf. Thank you so much, and everybody who's joining us. So welcome to you and to everybody, and wishing everybody a Chag Kosher V'Sameach. So let's consider for a moment this unique and remarkable evening, which is now set to unfold before us. Listen carefully, dear friends. Listen carefully. Imagine if 110 of us lined up outside, arms linked. And if anybody wants to post their address, I'll come over with 109 people and myself and yourself. Let's say 110 of us line up outside your house, arms linked. How far down the sidewalk would we stretch? Now, imagine that each person represents one generation since the Exodus. That chain represents how many generations of Jewish people have been sitting around their Seder tables telling this very story. Figure it out. A generation is 30 years. So 110 times 30 equals 3,300. You and I are part of that chain. Through it, we link hands with our parents who sat at the Seder table before us. Our children are the next link in that chain. Think about all the events and choices which brought you to this Seder tonight. Everything that had to happen to make it possible for you to be here right now. What, if any, just one of the 100 generations of your ancestors had abandoned Judaism in the face of persecution? What, if any, of the wildly improbable events that enabled Jewish survival despite millennia of oppression, exiles, and wanderings had not occurred? It took million miracles to bring each of us to this evening. We are each a product and products of millennia. The existence of every single one of us is a miracle. You, me, all of us are a miracle. This is the meaning of the blessing. We will all say together as we begin the Seder, Shehechiyonu. We thank God for the miracle of bringing us here tonight. Having just considered 3,000 years of Jewish history, let me ask you a simple question. What do you think is the most important moment in Jewish history? What is the most crucial moment of our existence and our survival? There are many good answers to this question. Abraham and Sarah responding to God's call when it all began. We could say that. We could say the most important moment is the Exodus, when we became who we are. We could even add giving the Torah at Mount Sinai, when we entered into a covenant with God. But I think there is only one correct answer. Stand by, dear friends. Hold on to that matzah. I think the most important and crucial moment of all of Jewish history is this very moment. Is this very moment. Why? Because all of history, all of the sacrifice, and all of the heroism, the exile and the redemption, the pain and the joy, has led us to this very moment. And now history, all of it, has been turned over to us, to you and me, and to everyone sitting at our Seder table. We control not only our own destiny, but the destiny of thousands of years. We are the final link in the chain that ties every generation of our ancestors to us, sitting right here in this room. The future we chart will determine the meaning of everything that came before us. The story's next chapter has not yet been written, and we, you and me, hold the pen. Imagine for a moment you travel to the heavenly worlds for a short visit. With flowers, mountains, rivers, and music in the background, it's indeed the most wonderful world, as heavenly as heaven can be. On this journey, you come to a beautiful door. Behind it, there's a library filled with millions of big, beautiful books that are leather-bound with gold embossed lettering. You see that one of them is labeled with your name on the spine. And you pick up the book, and you begin to read, and you discover that it recounts the story of your life in vivid detail. Your good days, your bad days, your triumphs and your struggles, your pain and your joy, your hopes and your fears. The book tells your story so perfectly and so honestly. As you arrive at the final written page, you read about this evening. You're sitting at this Passover Seder, and the book stops. There's no ending to the story. Although there are many blank pages, it is up to you how the story will be completed, what the last chapters will contain. Jewish history, too, contains innumerable blank pages which we all must fill. We are characters in the story, but also its authors. In this sense, all of Jewish history depends on us. And so this very moment at the Seder is the most crucial moment of Jewish history. The way we live now changes the meaning of everything that has come before us. So each of the 4 cups we raised tonight is an act of memory and a gesture of commitment. The story we tell is not yet done. It begins with our ancestors. 110 generations ago, on that great night of the original Exodus, and it continues with us here and now in every single zip code, in every single town, city, state, every single country around the world. Tonight, we blend our songs and prayers to those of all the generations of Jewish people who preceded us. It's a majestic symphony, and we call it the Passover Seder. Let us bring that symphony to a crescendo. I say hello to Holly Feynman Lapinel. Thank you so much. Zisem Pesach to you, to Denise Zellickson. Unbelievable. And to Lynn Feldman and everybody out there listening. Thank you. If you have a question or a comment, feel free to post it on our Facebook page. Now, let's continue this. For those who are joining us, we're having a virtual Seder, so to speak. We're all imagining, we have good imaginations. We're all sitting at our Seder table, and I'm sharing with you, and hopefully you will share it to your friends and neighbors and guests who come to your Seder, ideas to make our Seder so much more meaningful. I saw a thought late last night, why do we call it a Seder? The whole evening of the whole night is celebrating miracles, which are breaking the order, breaking nature. And the answer is, on the night of the Seder, we come to realize that the Seder, the order of our life, or our attitude, our outlook in life, is really higher than nature. Every aspect of our history has broken what we would say the typical ideas that we think. We have the ability on the night of the Seder to break all the boundaries, to break all that inhibitions that we've placed ourselves over the years. The Seder, the order of the night of the Seder, is that we are living deeply a life that is really higher. The structure of our life is miraculous, beyond all order. Good morning to Peter Hershon, who always cares for the future of Jewish life. So, unlike other religions and primarily spiritual, the primary spiritual institution of Judaism, I know this is going to make people fall off their Seder chairs. You know where the primary goal or life of Judaism is? Not the house of worship, the synagogue. No, I'm a rabbi of a synagogue. Why would I even say such a thing? The answer is the future of Judaism is not in the synagogue. And we see, sadly, the breakdown of that. Because the true future and life is in the home. Certainly the synagogue is certainly important, but it is a spiritual accessory to the home. The strength of a nation derives from the home, its foundation and its core. It is not by chance that the Seder, the oldest Jewish ritual, takes place in the home, surrounded by family, just as it did in Egypt so many years ago. Why would that be? Because the home shapes our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions more than we know, which greatly impacts our performance in other aspects of our lives. A good illustration of how home is an unacknowledged but decisive life-shaping place is illustrated by an experiment conducted by Yale University using a simple cup of coffee. An actor asked random people to hold a cup of cold coffee for a moment. The actor takes something out of his pocket, takes the cup of coffee back and says, "Thank you." 100 people are given an iced coffee, and 100 people are given a hot coffee. After half an hour, another actor comes by and says, "Listen, we're doing this little test." He told the subjects a story about an individual. The subjects were asked to access the personality traits of the individual. Here's where it gets interesting. 80% of the people that were given iced coffee said the person was cold and mean. 81% of the people that got hot coffee said that the person was warm or gentle and nice. If the temperature of a cup of coffee has the power to influence us, how much more does the home environment influence our day? Our susceptibility is greater than we imagine. By celebrating holidays and Shabbat in the home, we give our children warm memories that uplift and strengthen for a lifetime, that are inspiring and indelible. Consider also how small rituals in home can transform our thinking and feeling. A mezuzah on your door, kosher in the kitchen, Jewish books on our coffee table become sparks that brighten a life. The home is where we develop our values and build our identities. Therefore, it is natural that Passover, the festival of Jewish identity, is celebrated in the home. Let's continue. Little tidbits, little insights to the Seder to make it more meaningful to all of us. Let me bring you back now to Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon was a good friend of Eitan Kolshevsky. They knew each other on first-name basis. I want you to know that Richard Nixon didn't sing Dayenu. Dayenu, Dayenu. What do I mean? Richard Nixon didn't sing Dayenu. Well, we all know Richard Nixon, president, was re-elected in 1972 by a landslide. 17 million votes. The largest margin of a popular vote ever recorded in American history before or ever since. So, he strode across the political arena like a colossus. And yet, Nixon's top political advisor, Chuck Colson, a confidant of Michael Soshnick, recounts a gloomy election night. It's in his book. The chief of staff, Bob Haldeman, was brooding. This is the night of the election of this amazing, vote. He sits there brooding. Nixon angrily is gulping down scotch. Colson, feeling let down, felt a deadness inside of him. These three men had achieved the zenith of world power, but not a single note of joy was discernible in the room. Colson writes, if someone had peered on us that night from some imaginary peephole in the ceiling of the president's office, what a curious sight it would have been. A victorious president grumbling over words he would grudgingly say to his fallen foe. His chief of staff angry, surly, and snarling. And the architect of his political strategy sitting numbed in some sort of a stupor. And of course, as we all know, Watergate still lay in the future. This experience is not unique. Too often, we strive towards a goal, achieve it, and then struggle to enjoy the fruits of our labors. The view from the mountaintop disappoints us. We work for years to earn an academic degree, a career, or a certain standard of living. We strive to get married, have a child, or own a home. But rather than revel in the victory we have achieved, our minds wander into the future, and we worry about what comes next. This is one of the greatest obstacles to happiness. Our inability to be present and appreciate what we have. We are always tugged towards the future. Working to decrease our fear for what comes next, then, is part of our journey towards happiness. So the idea is to decrease that fear. We must learn to tell our hearts that although we hear its fears, our mind must be focusing on the present and celebrate our blessings. A magical and liberating experience. And one of the best ways to become more present in life is gratitude. Gratitude. Gratitude roots us in the present moment, and it turns our eyes to what we have rather than what we lack. It is a psychological tool that frees us from all of our anxieties. By practicing gratitude, we break our enslavement to fear. This unleashes happiness and in turn leads us to an even more gratitude in a virtuous cycle. This is the central goal of the song Dayenu. Dayenu enumerates 15 kindnesses God did for us on the journey from slavery to freedom. We read it on the night of the Seder because the night of the Seder begins on the 15th day of the month of Nisan. It's a full moon. It's reflected with the 15 steps in the Haggadah and also the Dayenu. There's 15 of them. Each of these praises ends with the word Dayenu, which means that just one such kindness would have been enough. So by declaring Dayenu, we become fully present in the moment and attuned to the preciousness of each act of redemption and kindness, bringing us out of Egypt, splitting of the sea, caring for us in the desert. We experience each moment with joy and with deep gratitude. So celebrating the moment allows us to move joyously into the future, receiving it as yet another gift with open hearts and hands. When we greet each other, with that kind of fear, it ain't going no place. When we greet each moment with fear, wait, what will happen tomorrow kind of concern, we become beholden to our anxiety. We're not free. Our desire to control the future denies us the wonders of the present, making us bystanders to our own moments of joy. Even if you're the President of the United States, who has just won the greatest political victory the country has ever seen, you will be trapped in the prison of disappointment and suffering. So the principle of Dayenu, of gratitude to God and others for even the smallest present blessings, my friends, is crucial for living a happy life. Dayenu is a great liberator, a jolt into joy and freedom. So I urge everybody this year to make every effort to stay to the end of the Seder, to go through it, not only have a wonderful meal and then sei gesund, hasta la vista, but stay, do the Hallel, say the Dayenus, appreciate this. It's a great liberator, a jolt into joy and to freedom. And in that honor, let's join me. Ilu hotzi anu mim Mitzrayim, hotzi anu mim Mitzrayim, Dayenu, 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 Dayenu. Thank you so much. Thank you. I heard you singing there. It was amazing. The internet was cocking over here, and the radio was jumping up all around the place. Thank you. This is amazing. The music that was coming back to me into my ears was just uplifting. Let's continue with our virtual Seder, or imagine ourselves, it's Wednesday night, it's Thursday night, we're sitting with our Seder, sitting with our family and friends and guests who have been invited, and we're sharing and we're making every effort to make the Seder no stupid jokes, no talking about politics, not trying to outdo anyone else, not trying to push yourself and over anybody else or to be heard, but everybody together, collectively, feeling the evening, feeling the moments and sharing any ideas that you have, and certainly the ideas that I'm sharing today as well. So let's move on to another aspect of the evening and what is mentioned. Before the Jewish people left Egypt, the Torah tells us that God commanded them to ask the Egyptians for gold, silver, and jewelry. The commentators explain that God wanted the Egyptians to compensate them, however inadequately, for their centuries of unpaid labor. So when the Jewish people were leaving, God tells them what to do with the gifts they received. You are to dress your sons and your daughters in this jewelry and this fine clothing. Now, it seems peculiar that God would want them to dress their children in finery just before going on a long journey through the desert. One would imagine sneakers, nuts, stilettos would be the appropriate garb. And yet, we know this was no inconsequential request because God repeated it twice. The implication is clear. This act was an essential part of the process of liberation. It was a core element of what it means to leave Egypt. But why? After generations of slavery, we really knew what hardship was, what oppression was, and what abuse was. And we were there, for your edification, 210 years. Or maybe 215. It's all got to do with how the accounting went on, because originally it was supposed to stretch over 400 years, and that would have been if we would just worked during the daytime. But the sages tell us we worked day and night, so therefore it halved the time that we were there. And that's one of the reasons why we break the middle matzah, to remind ourselves of God's act of kindness in breaking into half the length of the intended hardship. It was woven into the fabric of their being. They had grown accustomed to victimhood and knew nothing else. That is why, when they faced adversity on the way to the Promised Land, they begged Moses to go back to Egypt in servitude. At least it was familiar. But God knew that if we were to make it to the Promised Land, they needed to cast off their victim mentality. He wanted to change the character of the children by changing their self-conception. They had to arrive as different people than the ones they left. Imagine a mother putting a gold necklace or a bracelet or a ring on a little daughter whose face brightens like never before. Imagine a father dressing his little boy in a new suit who straightened his posture, with pride. As their parents replaced their torn, old, raggedy clothes with beautiful, clean outfits, these children see themselves as dignified and free for the first time. As a child in London, I remember really every single one, whether you had money or you didn't have money, everybody made an effort when it came to Passover to start off the holiday with new shoes or a new item of clothing, a suit, if you could afford it, or a shirt. Why do we do that? And it was more for Pesach than any other holiday. The reason is, my friends, it goes back to what we're discussing here. They see their potential and possibility. A parent makes their effort for their children, means we believe in them, or the link they have for us into the future. Because they never stopped seeing themselves as anything but defeated. They had been slaves for too long. The parents never made it into the Promised Land. But from the moment they were ornated with jewelry and finery, these children had a different mindset. Rather than consider themselves as victims, the children believed themselves they had now become ambassadors. We have a mission. We possess the resources, the skills to fulfill our mission. Think about this, my friends. In our world today, if children are brought up to feel like they're victims, we got a problem. When we left Egypt, it was the exact opposite. Once freed, forget about the past. You're not victims anymore. We can live fruitful and fulfilling lives. They were able to now to glow. Hundreds of years later, twin boys were born to an alcoholic father. While the twins were growing up, their father would get drunk and mistreat them. When he drank, he became angry and mean. The twins grew into young men and left home and its tribulations as soon as they could. One son came to struggle with alcoholism himself. a condition he attributed to the fact that his father was given a shikara and alcoholism and abusive was all that he had ever known. The other son, in contrast, became a successful businessman. He was not only wealthy, but also disciplined, respectful, and kind. One day his colleagues asked why he never as much as touched alcohol. He'd explained that because my father was an alcoholic, and as a result had a terrible childhood. Both twins endured the same fraught childhood. But while one son imitated his father's shortcomings with a sense of inevitable of what he would become, the other was inspired by the dysfunction he witnessed and refused to remain the victim any longer. He reimagined who he could become. We are all faced with the same choice. What child will we become? What person will we become? Will we just repeat, or do we have the ability to renovate? No matter our past traumas, no matter how many generations of dysfunction, abuse, or deficiency that has preceded us, we can be children that don new clothes, thereby shifting our way of thinking and with it the course of our life. At the Seder, my friends, Boker Tov, Ashrei, to Steve Epstein, at the Seder we put on those new garments. We are commanded to see ourselves differently, to sing and celebrate as a free person, and toast 4 cups of wine to our freedom, wholeness, and our strength. So rather than become stuck in the desert like those with victim mentalities, we can choose to emulate their children who were born into slavery but march forwards towards redemption. So at the night of the Seder, or in preparation for the Seder, my friends, why don't we too change our clothes? I'm talking about in a more deeper sense. Why don't we come to the Seder this week with a new attitude, to see ourselves in a different way and move forward into our own promised lands? I want to say we are getting a tremendous amount of response on Facebook, and everybody listening, really, I do appreciate it. Let's continue on this. For those who are joining again, we are imagining ourselves all sitting at the Seder table this coming Wednesday night and Thursday night. And if there's anybody out there who has not, for their Seder table, some shmura matzah, hand-baked round matzah, give me a call. You can send me an email, rabbiperl@chabadminneola.com. And if it's within distance that we can get it to you by mail, we'll be happy to send you some shmura matzah. So include your name and address, or you could actually do it on behalf of somebody else as well. So, when I was a boy, I went to a camp called Gan Yisrael in the summer. One of the highlights was a 2-day, 30-mile canoe trip. I remember being there in the canoe with a friend, going down a fast-moving river, and debating whether or not to stop at a little island with nice scenery. The debate raged on back and forth as to whether or not to stop. But the fast-moving river did not wait for us to reach a consensus. The river settled it decisively. We had passed the island without stopping. Much of our life is like this. For example, you might wonder whether to go to sleep early or stay up until dawn. Struggling to make up your mind, you might weigh the opposing considerations over and over. But the march of time doesn't stop for your debate. If you fail to make up your mind, the sun will rise before you've reached a resolution. If your mind does not decide, life will. There is no pause button and no instant replay. The same applies to life's greatest decisions. Faith in Hashem, faith in God. If I ask, what do you think about God, the soul, and immortality? You may say, I do not know. I'm an agnostic. I'm still figuring it out and mulling it over. But while you can avoid making up your mind, you cannot avoid deciding how to live. You will either live as though it was godless, without any purpose, as though life is dictated by random chance in self-arrangements of atoms, only to end up in a cosmic ash heap. Or we can live as though our world is infused with ultimate meaning, guided by a good, loving God who infuses it with purpose and leads us to a glorious destiny. So, to sum it up, you either live with a positive, nourishing, and uplifting faith in God, or you don't. And therefore the agnostic, the Dreikop, misses the wonders of belief just as much as the atheist. You can't be neutral about God in practical life on a day-to-day basis. God parted the sea. We crossed over in safety. And at that moment, the Bible recounts the Jewish people believed in God, Vayiminu b'Hashem, and they broke into song. It's not by accident that the first time the Jewish people sang was immediately after they first believed. Vayiminu b'Hashem, u'Moshe avdai, oz yosher Moshe. Faith, person living with faith, turns life into a song. In Egypt and then at Sinai, the Jewish people encountered a higher being, a guiding hand that intervened in history, and that imbued creation with meaning and with purpose. They saw the truth up close, and they saw it with their own eyes. They perceived themselves not as protons and electrons and pizza and boxing blind, but as infinitely precious beings created in the image of God. And at that, they broke into song. So it's important, the night of the Seder, dear friends, come with a good attitude. Don't worry about the clock. Don't come in there asking what time is I'm going to eat. Come in with the attitude that I want to walk away with buckets full of faith, buckets full of the ability to know that the Seder, the order of our life, is beyond. The structure of our life is really filled with miracles and gratitude and all the points that we've been discussing today. Now, during the Seder itself, we also mix moror with charoises, the bitter herbs, with that pasty-like made up of wine and nuts and different things that make it into like a paste. It's called charoises. As Moses led the Jewish people through the desert, we all know they went for a few days without water. Desperately thirsty, they wondered whether they could continue their journey. Finally, they came to a stream. Thrilled, they rushed to drink from it. But when they tasted the water, it was bitter and undrinkable. Livid, not Glenlivet, just livid. They complained to Moses. So, what are we supposed to drink? What did God tell us? To put a stick of wood in the water, and when he did, the bitter water turned sweet. The people drank and quenched their thirst. What is the moral of this story of frustration and deliverance? Stand by, my friends. When life turns bitter, when things seem unfair, there's always another ingredient that's capable of turning the bitter water sweet. The despair is not permanent, nor is it inevitable. We may not understand why we're going through the difficult times. In life, we all get a taste of bitterness. But rather than growing angry and frustrated, we must find the missing ingredient that makes the future sweet. Rabbi Mendel Futerfas was one of the heroic Chabad Hasidim of the 20th century. He was sent to a Soviet gulag for 8 years by the communists. What was his crime? His crime was teaching Torah and strengthening Jewish life. When merchant ships arrived at the camp to pick up logs, the strongest prisoners were required to load them. So the anti-Semitic foreman gave Mendel the most dangerous task. He was to stand atop the logs on the ship and guide the crane unloading them. Since the crane was unsteady and it was difficult to balance on the logs, he was in constant danger. Every day during this work, Mendel would slip, landing in the icy water. Other prisoners would quickly jump in to rescue him, telling him how sorry they were that he had to endure yet another fall. The truth is, Mendel would later reveal with a smile, my accidental slips into the icy water were intentional. I was thrilled. Thanks to the anti-Semitic foreman, I was finally able to immerse in a mikveh every day in the Gulag. So he kind of, knowingly slipped off the logs into the water, so that would be considered like immersing in a mikveh. Can you imagine? In every difficulty, there's the danger of growing and staying bitter. Our hearts harden and our horizons narrow. Yet there's always the opportunity to reject despair by adding another ingredient, to turn the sour into the sweet, just as Reb Mendel did, turning his sour situation into a mikveh. So when we sit down and we have our morah and charesis together, the morah that we eat at the Seder reminds us of the hardships inflicted upon our ancestors in Egypt. It is a symbol of human pain and suffering across the ages. What has always been our response to suffering? We take this bitter herb and dip it into sweet charesis. Life has its bitterness, but our task is to add more ingredients and sweeten it to turn darkness into light. A people that dips more into charesis and makes a blessing over it is never defeated. I'd like to take a moment and look at my questions I'm receiving here. And one of the questions that I've received is, why is matzah shmura round? Very important question. First of all, it's based on the Torah. The Torah used the word ugois matzah. So the actual definition in the biblical terms for the matzah is uga. Uga is round. The reason why the matzahs generally are called, they're square, because they're made by a machine. And the machine matzah has been found to be easier when you make it square. But the round matzah is made by hand and is based on the Torah that ultimately the matzah should be round on ending. Somewhat similar to a marriage. We only, when under the chuppah, you give your kala a beautiful round ring without any nicks in it, that the life should be one continuous blessing, day in, day out, year in, year out. And so too, as we begin the process of freedom on many levels on the night of Passover, we begin it with a round handmade matzah. Let's continue this idea. Let's continue, and I really appreciate it. I want to say hello to Barry Wall. Amy's also listening. Amy, how will you have time to listen? You have so much to prepare. Oh, I know that Barry's taking care of everything. He's cleaning everything this year. You're going to sit back and just watch him. Thank you, Barry, for being such an amazing husband, an amazing father to everything you do. And Karen Dumbeck, good morning to you as well. The exodus from Egypt began when every family gathered together to share a lamb on the first Seder night. They dipped an azav, which is a hyssop branch, into the lamb's blood and dabbed it on the doorframes as a protection against the 10th plague. And I'm sure everybody knows this part of the history. Commentating on the use of the hyssop, the Medrash explains, there are things which appear lowly in human eyes. The hyssop, for instance, appears to be of no worth to people. And yet, with so small a thing, God worked miracles and freed the people from Egypt. What a beautiful and relevant message for contemporary times. Today, we worship idols of bigness, the famous, the powerful, the wealthy, the bigger, the better. Celebrity is our golden calf. We think of a person to be valuable They must be huge success, a giant personality, a big influencer, a TikTok influencer, who knows what, a superstar. We are impressed by the number of followers someone has on social media. The more someone is liked and tweeted about, the greater their worth. Everything is data-driven and everyone is number-obsessed. The problem with worshipping the gods of bigness and giving free rein to our desire for fame is that we run the risk of forgetting the significance of little things which really matter. Visiting a friend who is fighting to get well might seem a little thing to do, but in God's eyes and in your friend's eyes, it is big. This Shabbos morning, as I was preparing for our class at 9 a.m., one of our members came in. Michael Sasha came in with a little cup of tea, hot tea. No milk, but just hot tea. And I said, who's that for? He says, for me. And why did he do that? He said, because he saw I was very tired on Friday night. I want to tell you, dear friends, I'm sharing this with you because I know that he's not listening, so he won't be upset. But the small little things that you do for somebody are very big. That's what happened to me. I'm sharing. Maybe it's happened to you as well. I hope it's happening to you, that someone does something small for you, but it means something really big. A few kind words to someone who is lonely might not seem so much, but it makes all the difference. By undertaking such unimportant acts, you become like that hyssop. You become God's messenger. You make the world a kinder and a more loving place to live in. You make changes that cannot be measured. No one is loved more than a mother. She is precious, not because she is a celebrity, but because she believes in her child when no one else does. She loves unconditionally. She works for her family tenderly, lovingly, and tirelessly. I know so many of them. One of them, I think, is Amy. She is always there to catch them when they fall and to cheer them on towards success. She performs kind deeds without grabbing headlines and is more precious to God than all the public heroes. The selfless deeds of the man and the woman who do good, who do mitzvahs, the unglamorous everyday acts of heroism represents human beings at their best. Their greatness might not be broadcast, but it endures. All our admiration over big and the famous, the high and the mighty, my friends, as we all know, is a delusion. It's not the power, the wealth, and the recognition which makes a life successful, but its content. We ought never underestimate the importance of little things to make a big difference. It was Passover, and as on all holidays, the students of the Baal Shem Tov came to Mezhebush to spend Passover with their Rebbe. It was always an uplifting, magical experience to be in the presence of the Baal Shem Tov, the founding father of Hasidism. But on this particular Passover, the students could sense that something terribly was wrong. The Baal Shem Tov was not in his usual buoyant spirit. The Baal Shem Tov did not expound on the deep meanings of the Haggadah. Instead, he quietly read the text. Near the end of the Seder, the Baal Shem Tov closed his eyes. The room was silent. Suddenly, the Baal Shem Tov started laughing. Mazel tov! Mazel tov, he said. You should know that the simplest person has the power to move heaven. The disciples sat perplexed as he began to explain. A few days ago, I had a premonition that a pogrom was going to break out in a certain village of 400 Jewish families. The peasants were planning to attack on that time, on the first night of Passover. I prayed with all of my strength, but I couldn't overcome this looming catastrophe, says the Baal Shem Tov. When we sat down to the Seder, I didn't see any hope. But in an instant, everything changed. Let me tell you how. Tonight, a childless couple who live in the village where this pogrom would break out was sitting at the Seder table. Although they are simple and unlearned, they had an exceptionally they were filled with goodness and kindness. When they reached the section of the Haggadah about the Egyptians throwing the newborn baby boys into the Nile, the wife started to cry. Her husband tried to comfort her. "My sweet wife, don't be sad. After all, the Jewish people were finally taken out of Egypt." The wife spoke back. "If God had blessed me with a son, I would have protected him and not let anyone hurt him. And I certainly would not have let anyone treat my son the way God let us be treated by the Egyptians." The husband stood up. He stood up for God and said, Hello. God is righteous in all that he does. It's only that we can't understand why it is good. But the wife argued back and retorted, "No, why isn't God more compassionate? In his infinite wisdom, he can figure out a way how to be kinder in a more revealed way so that we can see and know it. How could he have treated us like this?" The argument proceeded as they progressed through the Haggadah. Finally, after completing the 4th cup of wine near the end of the Seder, the husband couldn't think of another answer to his wife's arguments against God's behavior. So he conceded. "My wife," he says, "you're right. God should have treated his children better." They both laughed, and the tensions melted away. Then they got up, joined hands, and sang and danced around the Seder table, celebrating the miracles God performed in Egypt. At that moment, the woman's words and their dancing shook the heavens. Through the merit of her argument and her joy, the danger against that community there, of that village, was neutralized. God had intervened. The Baal Shem Tov said to his disciples, "When I saw the effect that this dancing had, I couldn't contain myself. I burst out laughing, for I rejoiced in the power of their sincerity and joy, which saved the lives of hundreds of people, even when my prayers were of no avail at all." You should know, concluded the Baal Shem Tov, when two of them danced, not only did they dance, but all of the heaven danced with them together. We may find ourselves sitting alone or with a loved one, enjoying a moment of holiness. Even while engaged in a mitzvah or noble deed, we think, "I'm just a simple man or a simple woman, unimportant, invisible, inconsequential. Who knows what I'm doing? Who cares? I'm living in this zip code. It's not a Tony neighborhood. It doesn't have a locked gates. I don't go here, I don't go there. I'm nobody." My friends, the Seder reminds us, God knows and is cheering you on. As you sing at the Seder, heaven sings with you. History changes for the better because of your joy of what you're doing. Whether it's for your family or for somebody around you, your joy is felt in heaven. A few kind words to someone who is lonely, or a joyous prayer, may not seem like much, but in God's hands, that's the hyssop that becomes a force capable of saving the whole world. My friends, so much we can learn about, so much we can go on for the Seder itself and appreciate it. You know, as I was coming and I was thinking about the Passover and the concept of freedom in the world that we live in, you know, obviously all of us must appreciate the freedoms that we have in the United States of America, that we can come and there's a political system and elections. And that's one level of freedom. But there's a deeper level of freedom that Passover reminds us of, the freedom we must have within ourselves. In order to get to that level of freedom, it also requires effort. That's why, you know, preparing for Pesach is not an easy thing. We don't run away to some island. That's not the way to celebrate Passover. It's with the effort, the cleaning, searching for chametz on a level, deeper level as well. So much out there. And the more we put into it, the more we get out of it. So the deeper freedom that we have really makes it all dependent on all the efforts that we make in preparation for this. I could go on, but I know the time has grabbed me. I just want to conclude by wishing everyone, make every effort. If you have some time today, look at the Haggadah, become acquainted with the order, if you have one with commentaries, or go online. And the more we put in, maybe not be able to share every single detail at the nights of the Seder, but if you go in with the knowledge of the depth and the meaning of the importance of every aspect of the Seder itself, it'll speak for itself. All these ideas that we're discussing, plus all the memories that you also have yourself as you connect to what your parents and grandparents and those many generations that are linked. And we will really appreciate and understand with great honesty the importance of where we've come from, the role that we play today in ensuring the future. That is why the Seder, we spend time speaking about the past, we recognize the present, and then of course we open up the door and do the Hallel and do the Dayenus and do everything as we prepare ourselves for the wonderful future for the entire world. This is your host, Rabbi Perl, wishing you a Chag Kosher V'Sameach, a wonderful, happy and joyous Passover, and we look forward to being with you during the holiday to continue our celebration. Have a wonderful week.